Appreciate everybody being here. For those of you that are just dialing in, and whether or not this is your first time being here, this is Richard Bonilla calling in from New York City. And this is Mindset is Everything, which is our event that we do once a month. Basically, we have guest speakers that come on, and we have our coach that we work with on an ongoing basis that's here as well. And this is part of something that we have here that's also called Elite Lifestyle Academy. And the whole purpose of all this is really just about helping other people go from where they are to where they want to be. We know that the difference between where you are and where you want to be is just literally knowledge, amongst other things that will help you get there. And that's why, of course, why we do what we do. So I'm excited actually to have, once again, my personal coach, a gentleman that's helped me achieve many things over the past couple of years and helped me do everything from achieve what I've achieved financially and business-wise. Also been able to maintain a very level-headed during the pandemic, and more importantly, just kind of help me with my perspective and on things and as things have progressed. So without further ado, very excited to have our guest speaker here, none other than Mr. David Byrd. So Mr. Byrd, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, perfect. Go ahead, take it away.
Hey guys, how's everyone today? Good to see you and good to be with you. I have an interesting topic that I want to talk with you about this evening. I don't really know exactly how long this session might last. It could be short, it could be long. It depends on kind of where your head goes with what I'm going to talk with you about this evening. Last time we talked, I think we talked about the law of attraction, how everything vibrates and you vibrate, and the universe has a tendency to respond to the vibrational frequency that you put out. That was an interesting conversation. But in this conversation this evening, I want to talk about a comparison between two things that are significant in relationships, in communications, and especially in leadership. And those two things are very much alike, but they're not alike at all. And therein lies the problem. I want to talk about the difference and the separation between perception and perspective. Now, we talk about both those things, and we have different understandings of what those things really mean. So I want to talk about kind of a general discussion about what they really mean, and then how they apply to us as leaders, as parents, as managers, as people in a job, as teachers, as lawyers, as whatever we are, how those things apply. I want to talk about perception and perspective. So I need you to have a sheet of paper to write on, notebook preferably. And I want you to write down perception, perspective, and a little space in between them. Perception is what we see, and perspective is how we see it. Now, why is that significant? Because they're two completely different things. Perception is what we see. Perspective is how we see it. Two people can see exactly the same thing and come away with 100 different perspectives about what they saw. I've heard police reports and law enforcement talk about how you can have 5 witnesses to a crime and all 5 witnesses saw something different. But you can piece them together and make some sense out of it, but they all saw it differently. Perception, perspective. Now, how does this relate to us as leaders or directors or managers or people, just people in life in general? How does this affect us? Most important thing is to understand that other people are not seeing things in the same way that you are. Now, does that make them wrong? No, it doesn't make them wrong. It just makes them it just defines them as a person with a different perspective of what they're seeing than you have. And so many times, especially in today's environment that we're in, it's so critical because different people are seeing things differently. And it's the same thing we're looking at. We're looking at one thing and we're seeing things differently. Everybody has their own right to their perception of what they saw or what they're seeing. For instance, someone can walk up to you and say something, and you could take it in any kinds of different ways. You could walk up and say, "Hello, how's things going?" And one person might take that as someone saying, "Well, it's not going real well." Or when that's not really what they said at all, it's just said, "How's things going?" And so we run into situations with yourself and also other people in leadership where people saw the same thing or heard the same thing, but the perspective about it is different. So in a leadership position, what do? You want to make sure that you have a consensus on the perception, the perspective of what people see. So in business, when something different rolls out, an announcement is made, for a leader to believe that everybody heard it the same way is a big, big, big mistake. Good leaders will always send the managers around to make sure that people heard it in the way it was intended to be said. Because if we don't do that, there will be a lot of misrepresentations out there. Now that also applies in personal relationships. Have you ever had someone say something to you and it offended you? And then you go talk to a friend about what that person said, and the friend says, "Well, that didn't sound that way to me." So the way you took it versus how someone else feels about the way you took it is not connected. Now, what's the purpose of all this discussion? Perception and perspective causes problems in relationships, and it causes problems in the work environment and in the workplace, and especially in management and leadership. We as leaders always need to understand that what we're saying is not being heard in the same way. So what do you do about that? What are some things that we can do about that can kind of massage perceptions around in a way that we can have a collective understanding of it? Number one, say it the same way over and over and over and over again. Now, those of you who know me, you know I've always, for the last 40 years of my life, I've lived from a system. And that system is very simple. And in that system, I say the same things over and over and over and over and over again. And I do my best to say it exactly the same way, even using the same words all the time. Now, why do I do that? A lot of people feel that I got nothing else to talk about. And that's not the case. I can talk about a lot of things. But when I talk about something, I want to talk about it in exactly the same way. And I want to use exactly the same words every time. Because the perception that I'm sending out might be one thing one time I say it, and then the next time it might be something else. But if I say it the same way over and over and over again, then that spaced repetition will have an effect on everyone's perspective of what I'm saying. So the idea that you can say something once and everybody's got it. I mean, everybody on this call, you know that's just not the case. That doesn't work that way. So perception versus perspective is vitally important in communicating, especially from a leader to those who that person leads. For the leader to assume that they can say something one time and everybody got the meaning of it is a big, big, big mistake. And I work with leaders, And I'd like to have a nickel for every time one of those leaders has told me, I tell them and I tell them and I tell them, and they still don't understand. Now, I kind of grin inside about that, because that's not the people's problem. It's the leader's problem. The leader is not communicating properly and not assuming responsibility for how what they're saying is being received on the other side, because perception and perspective is always different, and you always need to be working on the perspective side of things. Understand that what you say is not going to be understood the same way by every person. And also, as a person gaining the perspective, when you hear something, it's always good to let it settle in before you create perspectives about it, how you feel about it. Sometimes I've seen people become very upset over an announcement that was not intended to be like that. Maybe the person said it the wrong way, used the wrong words. It wasn't really intended to be like that, but it came across that way. So the reason I'm talking with you guys about this is because you're all leaders. And when you talk to people that you're leading, understand they're not hearing it in the same way. You talk to 5 people individually, they're all 5 are going to hear what you said differently. So next time you bump into them, you say it again. Next time you bump into them, you say it again. Next time you bump into them, you say it again. Spaced, repetitious hearing of the same words the same way creates clearer perspectives. Now, the issue of perception versus perspective works in a little bit different way. It also works in a situation in relationships. In working with leaders, I've learned over the years that a lot of times people get in the ditch. Have you ever felt that way? You just feel like you're in a dang rut and you can't get out, or maybe in a deep hole and you can't get out. And when you're trying to speak to someone in that capacity, it's difficult, because you know they are hearing what you're telling them from a very negative perspective. In other words, they're in the hole. They know that, and you're trying to talk them out of the hole, and that's a difficult conversation to have with people. And I've learned over the years that there is a system that you can use to manage that, and you don't have to do it. You call on the individual to do it, the person who needs the help. I know in sales, sales managers, they have people that get upset, and they have a bad month, and they get so down they can't pull themselves back up, and the manager tries to coach them and tries to help them, and it seems to get worse. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you as the manager are the problem now, and this person is the one that's condemning you for giving them the bad information. So there's an easy way to get past all of that from a one-on-one perspective of helping people with their perspective. So when someone calls you and they're all upset about what someone said about them or some situation like that, and now you're the leader and you're trying to help this person feel better. Well, let me share something with you about that it's taken me 42 years to learn it, but I've learned it well. You cannot affect someone else's feelings. You can talk to them for hours and they still feel the same way. That has frustrated me for so many years that I spend hours trying to help a person, build a person up and help them feel better. And the next day they're right back where they were before I talked to them the last time. Now, what's going on there? I did not do anything related to their perspective of their circumstance. All I did was talk some encouraging words, and it just didn't work. All the encouraging words in the world won't help you change your perspective towards something. And the words that I use to talk to you to try to get you to change your perspective do not work. It's kind of like, you don't hear it. So I developed just a simple little one sheet exercise that you can do with anyone that you're working with who's going through an emotional issue and emotionally upset. They need help. What do you do? Da, 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 da. Understand and understand it well. You cannot make them feel better. You can't do it. You can talk to them for hours. And when they hang up the phone, they still feel the same way. So I learned a long time ago, for my own benefit, I don't spend hours on the phone trying to help a person feel better. I want to help a person crawl out of the ditch. I want to teach a person how to build a ladder to crawl out of the hole. And there is a way. I call it the perspective analysis. A real simple little sheet. Any of you who have the Achievement Planner, which is a planner I wrote over 30 some odd years ago, and it's a kind of a daily planner with a lot of stuff in it. You can go to my website, www.byrdgroup.com, spell Bird with a Y, not an I, and click on products, and then click on Achievement Planner, and it'll come up and you can see all the details of the Achievement Planner. In the Achievement Planner, in the green tracking section of the Achievement Planner, there is this analysis. It's called, let's see if I can get it. It's called a perspective analysis. Now, what I'd like for you to do is I'm going to do a little exercise with you. I'd like for you to take a sheet of paper, and I want you to divide the paper into half. Just draw a line straight down the middle of the sheet of paper. Now, on the left-hand side, I want you to title that left-hand side as My Reality. My reality. Or you can just put current reality. Current reality. And on the right-hand side, I want you to write can-do list. On the right-hand side, top, can-do list. So on the left-hand side, you have current reality. On the right-hand side, you have can-do list. Now, let's say you're talking to a friend, and this friend is emotionally upset over some issue. Now, you need to understand they are upset, and I'm not discounting that. They are upset. However, you cannot assume that their perspective about being upset is in the right place. Usually it's not. It's about all the things they can't do. And there's a real cool test you can use anytime you're trying to help someone emotionally out of some trauma or heartbreak or whatever, is if you ask them, what can you do about your current situation, what will they say? You probably already know. They'll say, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. That's wrong. That's a misunderstanding, because there's always something you can do. And I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a second. What I do is, if I'm working with someone who is going through some type of emotional issues and I want to help them, I know I can't make them feel better. They're the only ones who can make themselves feel better. But I know I want to help them. So what I do is I ask them to take out a sheet of paper. If they have a planner, I ask them to take out their perspective analysis. On the left-hand side, they've written down current reality, or my reality, current reality. Now, on this side of the page, I'm going to ask them to write down everything they can think of about the current situation that they're upset about. Everything. How you feel about it, what you think of the other person, everything that you can think about the current situation, write it down. If it hurts, say it hurts. I'm emotionally upset. It causes me to cry. Write down everything. Now, when you have completely exhausted that list, I want you to go to the right-hand side. And you know the right-hand side is your can-do list. Now, you remember what I said, that when you ask people what they can do in the middle of emotional trauma, they'll say there's nothing I can do. However, they're overlooking things that they truly can do. So once they've written down everything about their current situation, now they go to the can-do list. And I asked them to fill out everything they can think of that they can do that would help the circumstance that they're facing. Everything they can do. One thing they can do is they can work to get a good night's rest. You know, take a couple of Tylenol and try to get you a good night's rest. Remove your mind from it, get a good night's rest. That's one thing you can do. There's always things you can do, but I promise you, the person's going to say, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do about this. In reality, there's all kinds of things you can do about it. Here's what I do. I ask them to fill out the left-hand side, everything about their current reality. And then I want them to fill out the right-hand side, their can-do list. And I want them to write down a target date by which they'll get these can-dos done. And then when you get that list filled out, call me back. When they call me back, I go over their can-do list. And usually, here's what happens. Usually, if a person will do this, and I promise you, they don't all want to do this. They want somebody to help them feel better, and it just doesn't work. When they do this, number one, they automatically feel better. But the most important thing I've seen is the perspective of what happened has completely changed, usually for the better. They have written down a can-do list. They've written down some dates of things that they can do toward working their way out of that situation. All they focus on from this point forward is their can-do list and getting those things done. You'd be surprised at the number of people who call me back after they filled out their current reality. They look at it and they call me back and they say, David, I just wanted to call you back. After I wrote down my current reality, I realized I really don't have this big a problem. The problem I'm facing is really not that big a deal. And I didn't realize it until I wrote all these things down. It's not that big a deal. This is easy to solve. What you have done for a friend in need, you have taught them how to solve their own problems. And quit leaning on people to help them feel better, because no one can do that for you. There's no one there. You can say encouraging words to me that make me feel better, but when it comes to climbing out of a ditch or climbing out of a hole, I've got to do that myself. And I can't do that if I'm not feeling better. So the whole issue of perception versus perspective is extremely important. So in life, when you hear someone talking about something that upset them, a good question to ask is, let me ask you something. Have you considered maybe another understanding of what that person meant when they said that? Is there possibly another way that could be intended? In other words, questioning what they saw may help them create a different perspective about what they saw, how they feel about it. So perception and perspective in human relations are always going to be different. As a manager or as a leader, you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware that what you are saying, people are not all hearing it exactly the same way. That's why you have to say very few words. Don't talk a lot. It's not about that. Say very few words, but say the same words the same way all the time. It's extremely important because that communicates consistent perspectives. Also understand that not everyone's going to have the same perspective of anything that you say in a leadership position. And also use the perspective analysis in helping people climb out of the ditch. Now, let me tell you something else I've learned about this thing. You know who has used this more than anyone? Me. When I have a problem that I'm working with, especially if it's something that it has, you know, I'm kind of emotionally connected to it and it's kind of dragging me down a little bit, this is the first thing I pull out: perspective analysis. Usually by the time I finish writing down everything about my current reality, I've already solved my own problem. Simply because I didn't have a clear perspective of what is really going on. So perception and perspective are different. And as a good leader, it's important that you know that, and it's important that you have some tools and some resources that you can use to make sure that you're communicating properly, and also to make sure you're prepared as a leader to help other people who might be in the ditch, might be in the hole, and wanting you to help them get out. Understand one thing, it's very important. You can't change anyone's feelings. Those feelings belong to them, and you can't help them feel better, but you can give them tools to help them help themselves feel better. Now, that's what I wanted to talk with you about this evening. Richard, if you would like, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
All right, sure. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the questions. And I guess while we're waiting, I'm going to chime in myself, actually, as I always do. So, you know, it's actually interesting because I've used this a few times, but I first learned about this in 2013, maybe it was roughly around there, something like that. So that was, you know, we all have our peaks and valleys in our life. And I was at a pretty low part. I was definitely transforming from who I was to who I am now, going through a little thing. And this actually helped me out a lot because I was in a very dark, deep place where I didn't know what I can do or anything like that. And I might have heard you speak about this or something like that. And I said, all right. And I took it out and I started writing it. And, you know, once again, I was able to get myself out of the situation by writing what I could do. You know, I could do this. I can call this person. I could walk here. It just, you know, and I think you talked about this before, it put me also into a proactive mindset where now my mind shifted from being more of a victim and being reactive to my environment and saying, well, okay, well, what can I do about it? And that really helped me. I mean, like I said, I probably used it a few times, but the time that it really helped my life was 2013. And that was, once again, how I helped myself get out of that situation and change things. So yeah, it was definitely helpful on that. So appreciate that. Don't want to have other questions. If anybody else has any questions or comments, feel free to ask. If you should be able to unmute yourself, I believe I have that option in there. And you can also chat if anything else. All right, we're going to give you guys another 10 seconds, then I'm going to ask another question. Hey, listen, when everybody's invited, but I'm taking notes. I took 2 pages of notes. It's definitely helped me on multiple levels. So here's my last question. And if anybody has anything else, please make sure you chime in. So what's the difference between repeating yourself for the sake of, people just think you're just being repetitive and repeating yourself, and being, and like, impactful, or being like very specific on what you say versus just being a person that repeats themselves over and over again? I feel like there's a thin line, and is there a difference, or is it the same thing?
One's intentional and and proactive, and the other is reactive.
Okay.
In other words, it's kind of hard for me to come up with the exact thing I'm trying to say. I'm trying to get my head screwed around on it, but when you're when you're reacting, you are you're creating, you're instinctively creating issues in your head. And that's not good, because your natural instinct is always driven by fear, and it's going to create something fearful. But when you're being proactive about it, then the being proactive always moves you forward. Reactive always causes decline, always moves you backwards. Proactive thought, any kind of proactive procedure to move forward, is going to create growth. So, Richard, what you're talking about is a proactive technique. And it takes you away from the reactive process of just simply reacting to what's happening. And we've all seen that, where people get so upset they just overreact and create far more problems than they started with. And it's always best to take the proactive side as opposed to the reactive side, especially in communications.
Got it. Awesome. Okay. And I think Roosevelt has a question. So go ahead, Roosevelt, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, so my question is, what if you can't think of anything that you can do about the situation, or the other person can't think of anything that they can do about the situation? Then what do you do?
Are you talking about this list?
Yes.
Okay, where it says current reality, you can't think of anything?
Meaning the not necessarily current reality, meaning the other
You're
part.
talking about the other side of the list, the can-do part?
Yes, the can-do part.
Here's the reality about that. I find that not to be true in 90% of the cases, maybe 95% of the cases. But the reason you have a current issue with your current reality is because your head's blocked from it, and you haven't allowed yourself to think about the other side. What can I do? Well, there's always one thing you can do. You can change your mind about it. You could do that, because you're in 100% control of changing your mind or keeping your mind on it one way or the other. I know typically that is the typical response to anyone ever gives me to this situation. Oh, there's nothing I can do about it. Absolutely nothing. But the reality is they have not allowed their head to go there, to think about the realities of what they possibly could do about a situation. But I guess if you get to a situation and you think it through rationally, not reactively, but rationally and proactively, you think it all the way through. I have come up with situations that, there's just not a whole lot I can do about that situation. And if I come to that, and I have come to that on occasion, it's rare, but I have come to that, and there's absolutely nothing I can do, and I know I'm thinking rationally and proactively, then there's one thing I can do at that point. Just leave it. Just take it out of my head. If there's nothing I can do, why do I need it up here anymore?
That's true.
I don't know if that helps, but here's what people do. They say there's nothing I can do, and then they spend the next 5 days worrying about it. They didn't solve anything. So don't go there so fast that there's nothing I can do. There's usually always something you can do, but I have to admit, I have come up on circumstances that, especially that involve maybe someone else. There's just nothing I can do about that right now. Nothing. And if there's nothing I can do, then I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm going to move on in a loving, proactive way. I'm not going to ignore them, but I'm going to move on.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Richard, I enjoy these little monthly chats. I get to obliviate.
Well, definitely appreciate everybody being here. As once again, this is a reminder, this is something that we do on an ongoing basis here with Elite Lifestyle. We are about helping people become better and become more of who they want to be. And definitely grateful for what Mr. Byrd does with us on a regular basis. And if you're the first time looking here with Elite Lifestyle, just know that this is what we're about. And you can learn more about the David Byrd's coaching system and what we do here by reaching out to the person that invited you here. So once again, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on the next call. Take care. Have a good evening.
Good night, guys.
Bye-bye.